Hello everyone, this is Alex with Banana Hobby, and today I want to take some time to speak about a very wonderful model that we have here coming soon. It's the PAK FA T-50. Everything about it is so great, the scale, the assembly, which is something I'm going to be speaking about right now, because for a model this size, I feel that it's a pretty quick and simple assembly to put this airplane together and get it flying as soon as possible. I know that excitement when you get something new and you want to just have it flying right away, but you want to have it flying right. So the assembly for this model is very straightforward, and you can get this airplane flight worthy just right about after you have everything set up and all the surfaces are responding correctly, and after you have your battery fully charged and all that good stuff. So I'll be taking it out of the box right here to get it laid out on the table and show everything in terms of the fuselage and main wings. Okay guys, so here's the T-50 out of the box. Everything that we need for the assembly is already here laid out, such as the fuselage, the main wings, the horizontal stabilizers, and the vertical stabilizers. I have them set down on the table. Other miscellaneous pieces like the nose cone right here, and then the tail piece that goes over here at the end. Things like the short spars, and then they actually give you a screwdriver to put together the airplane too, but I'll be using my own. And also a glue or the rubber cement for the airplane, which I'll be using epoxy as well. But that's also supplied with the box, the ARF airplane, or the ARF version. Okay guys, so I wanted to go over a few things with the fuselage. A couple of people had asked if it had certain features such as the actual full-size model, and one of them were the leading edge controllable slats here at the very front that are not available with this model, so they're fixed. And then there was two other things. It was the wing root extensions here at the very front that are also controllable on the life-size model, but are not available here on this scale replica. And also for the vertical stabilizers, they're not all moving. So here I have it right here. It's really just a separate rudder surface control on its own. So they're not all moving like the real model. But other than that, I am really amazed by how well the scale and appearance is to this RC version that we have here. It's a twin 70mm 2100 kV motors, and I'm gonna see if I can get you a closer look on the fuselage. So wow, this thing is big. So here's the top portion, and you can see the intakes, how they run through the detail of the intakes on the fuselage at the very top here. Like I mentioned, it's not split into two. It's pretty much one whole piece that's already put together for you from the factory as an ARF version. We have the vertical stabilizer servos here, the rudder servos, some decals on the engines, the nozzles here at the back, which are full 360 nozzles. I'm gonna go ahead and, actually, before I turn it over, I'm gonna lay it back down on the table. And if we take off the canopy, it's actually like a latch system, so you pull, and then you take this off. And this is where your battery will go over, or will go on. So the battery is going to be installed on this section, and it'll make it a lot easier when you're trying to balance the airplane. Turning this over, we have things like your nose landing gear here at the front, your main landing gears, the hatch so that you can access your EDFs and motors, and also the ESCs. We have here one of the thrust vectoring servos that can also be accessed easily if you ever have to make any changes or proceed with any maintenance. More thrust vectoring servos. Here we have your elevator servos. And as you can see, it's all accessible through just a couple screws and a top cover. Your main retracts. If you see here, this is actually an access point for the compartment where most of the wires meet up. So it's all going to be right here, and this is where you'll have all the connections and your receiver, and everything it's just pretty much here. So it's two separate compartments for the receiver and all the servo connections, and then for the battery as well. Very nice detail on the decals and everything I see here. I'm pretty amazed by it. Here we have these are the locking system, or the installation system that's going to be used when you're installing the wings together or putting the wings together on the fuselage. This also makes it easier if you don't have enough space, because this thing is pretty big. If you don't have enough space to transport it, you can also unscrew it and just simply pull off the wings, and it all becomes just one piece like this, just the way you see it. I got the right wing, same setup with the accessible servos. They're covered by a set of screws, and then the plastic cover here. Some decals, flap servo and then the aileron servo. We got the rudders here. This is the right rudder. Like I mentioned, unfortunately it's not all moving, but you can get that pretty nice canted appearance on the vertical stabilizers. Also the tail section, it's going to go over here at the end, and then the nose cone. And then for lastly is the elevators. So I'm going to see if I can get started with the build, just so you can see how simple it is to put this together. Okay guys, I'm getting ready to install the elevator, and I'm using a small tool such as this screwdriver. It's not that wide, and what I'm going to do with it is poke little holes through so that they serve as a guiding point for the hinges. You don't want something that's too thick, just really thin. And the reason for that is because once you're installing these hinges, they need something to catch onto. And if the area is too wide, these ridges here won't be as effective, and they won't hold on too well. So the purpose of this though is so that once you're getting them in, they're guided through and they have a point to go through, so they don't go too crookedly. And that's something that I've been able to work with, and it seems to be working out pretty well. It's all your preference. So I'm going to do the same thing here on the fuselage. And I'm centering this area as best as I can so that when the hinges go through, or when the elevator is installed, it's all flush and nice. And remember, keep in mind that when you're installing these hinges, there's a spar that runs through the elevator here. So you don't want this to hit or be in the way of the spar. So let me get a quick 5-minute epoxy mix going on, not too much. I just need a little bit for the installation of the hinges. And we're gonna put that at the very tip of the hinges. And what this epoxy will do is, it pretty much just serves as a way to keep them installed and keep them in place so that they don't rip off. And also the ridges that they have here work as a great way to keep them in place as well. So the hinges, they seem to be fine. Just get a little bit. This comes down to whichever method works best for you. So I'm gonna put them in on the elevator piece first. And you don't want them too far in yet, because they're also gonna be pushed in as you're pushing them in on the other end. And you're just gonna insert them in the area or the holes that you made so that they're guided through. And the reason you want to keep a close eye on the glue is so that it doesn't seep in onto the joint where the hinge moves, or else it's gonna lock it in place, and that's something that you don't want. So we got all the hinges installed. Now we just need to line them up with the fuselage. Perfect. Now we're just gonna slide them through. Very nice. All right, so everything's lined up and it's all moving perfectly. There's no binding, it's smooth. In a few minutes, the 5-minute epoxy will settle in and it'll just lock everything together. I'm going to get my push rod and I'm going to insert it on the servo arm. We'll position it into place and then we'll get it lined up. That pretty much does it for the elevator section. That seems to be the most complicated portion of this build. So now that that's out of the way, everything should be a little much easier now. Next, I'm going to move on to the vertical stabilizers and rudders. And one thing I want to point out is there's a section here that will be glued on for the rudders. And if you notice here, there's paint. And I would recommend to have that sanded down to, one, remove the paint, and two, make the surface here coarse. The reason for that is because epoxy, which is what I'm using right now, will bind the best when a surface is not smooth, but rather coarse. And by removing the paint, you're ensuring that the bond is happening between the two foam surfaces and not the foam from one piece or one part and the glue from the other. I've seen many cases where wings have been ripped off because this small detail was overlooked. And say for example, we did proceed with gluing together this area with the paint being there, it's not going to be a good bond because it's going to be the epoxy or the glue with the paint, and that just, you know, you're just in risk of having that area rip apart because of the improper bond. Okay guys, so I'm about ready to start gluing together the vertical stabilizers. I just want to point out one thing though. We have the surface here that I sanded down. I did remove most of the paint, but not all of it. And the reason for that is because I left the outer edge still with paint. That's because when I install the vertical stabilizer, it won't look like I sanded it down, and it won't be too obvious that some paint was removed to glue it back, to glue it in place. So this looks a little cleaner because the paint here is still at the edges. So I'm gonna get this ready. It's like before, it's a quick and easy 5-minute half and half mix. The pre-installed control horn is already here in place, and you want it on the side with the rudder, so it's looking good. You'll also be using this piece that will be installed as a guider. So we're gonna get this glued on. And just get that glue in there. This little spar that's gonna go through the end over here at the top. There's two areas, and you want the smaller, sharper looking end. Not that it's sharp, but just kind of goes in. You want that going inside the piece, inside the vertical stabilizer, sorry. And now we're just gonna surround the outer area. Okay guys, so I have the vertical stabilizers ready to be installed, and I have everything sanded down and ready. I have applied my glue. I tried to apply just a good amount so that it's not too much but not too little either. One thing I want to point out is this can be easily overlooked, and try not to do that. Try to pay attention in this section when you're putting in the vertical stabilizers. I have my glue ready on this point here, this part, and then on the outer edges, or these areas. There's one area where I didn't put glue, and that's where the servo, the rudder servo, would sit under. So in order to prevent any problems in the future where the arm is somehow binding because of glue, I avoided that area. So that's something that's an area where you don't want to put glue, because there's no surface where this foam is going to meet with the other end. So putting that in right now, and it went in perfectly. If you would like to, you can somewhat shave off a bit of foam at the very top where the servo arm is located, because it does get kind of tight in there, and I kind of like that, but I might shave off just a bit of foam so that the servo arm can have the proper movement. But right now it's looking like it'll move fine. I'll get the push rods installed and then try it then to see if it's necessary. It's just something I'm thinking about, but you know, it might not be necessary at all. So what I did was I applied the glue on this area where the vertical stabilizer meets with this plastic end right here. I avoided, or I omitted, this area here right under the servo, and then I continued to apply more glue over here onto the edge. So everything seems to be sitting in. I turned the airplane over so that we can get the main wings installed. And this is a pretty cool feature, because if you decide to not glue the wings in place, you can do that, by the way, but it's totally up to you, because there's a system here that's in place to lock the wings with the fuselage. So these two small shafts here, they'll run through these locking points here on the fuselage, and then we'll get these one screw on one, and then the other on the second piece here. Right now, what I'm going to do is get the spar installed so that we have it here and here on the main wing and on the fuselage. I marked it at the halfway point so that it's even. After that, we'll get all the wires hooked up, and then we'll get the locking mechanisms attached, and this side should be ready, and then we'll move on to the other side. So starting off with the wing spar first. If you want, you can also use some type of clear tape as a marking point, and also as a way to keep the spar in place, so that in a sense it kind of gives it some tension so that it doesn't freely move. But it actually looks like it's a pretty tight fit on the fuselage. And the locking mechanisms are in. We got it in the fuselage. Okay, and now we're going to connect the leads. and they've been labeled for you, so you just match the aileron with the aileron. And remember that when you're connecting these pieces, all the polarities need to match. So negative with negative, positive with positive, and signal with signal. The spar is right at the center. And next we'll get these screws in place. Second screw. There's several things that you can try to do depending on how you're going to use the airplane and how you're going to transport it and store it. It's optional, but it's not necessary, but it's optional. You can glue it in place, but just keep in mind that after you glue the wing, it's going to be hard to take it off. So I'm leaving that as is. I'm not going to glue on the wings because I'll be using the locking mechanism, which is just perfect and adequate to keep this airplane together. For the connections on the servo leads, you're also not required to do this, but you can use special locks to keep the harnesses together, or things like a zip tie, just so they don't disconnect. But it's actually really tight in place. I mean, they're not gonna move around, but like I mentioned, it's good to be safe. When I was installing the locking mechanisms, I made sure that the main wing was completely in, so that the surface here was as flush as possible, and it's looking great right now. With the installation of the main wings, this just leaves two final pieces. One being your nose cone, which is gonna go here in the front, and I'll glue that in place right now. And the second being the tail section at the very end. For the tail section, it's just important to make sure that you have the right side facing up. And you'll see that with the finish on the fuselage, it'll complete the panel lines. All right, so I'm currently preparing the nose cone so we can get that installed on the fuselage. And this is pretty much a straightforward procedure. I've gone ahead and prepared the area where the nose cone will be installed by sanding down any portion that had paint on it and making the surface coarse. Remember that with this type of foam, it'll bond best when the surface is coarse and not smooth, and that's exactly what we have right here. The nose cone seems to pretty much go in one way, but you still want to just make sure that it's in properly, and that is exactly what we want to see. The tail section is also pretty straightforward. There is no paint on this, and we'll get that in just like that. I'm in the process of setting up all the wiring for the system for the airplane, and I will be connecting everything to the receiver. But one thing I wanted to point out is that this is your retract sequencer that comes with the airplane. So you have one lead coming over here, which will be going into the, it's coming from the servo that's required for the door opening mechanism here at the nose landing gear. And you'll notice that two are connected like this, where the polarities are matching, and the other one is reversed. For the landing gears, this section doesn't really matter that much, because say if the main landing gears were coming in and retracting while the nose was extending, that means the nose was in reverse or opposite from the main landing gears. So in this case, the lead has simply just been reversed, and that'll sequence all of them together so that they retract together and they extend together. One other note is that I have my front nose, my nose servo lead here, and that's set up just as you can see here, and it's important to make sure that both of them, all leads are connected from the main and front landing gear, and the servo lead also going into the sequencer, so that everything sequences properly and also responds correctly. On my receiver, I'm using the stock 12-channel radio system receiver that you can purchase separately or as an option. You can obtain it with your ARF package. Even though there's 12 channels, I really only used 8. Because from the manufacturer, everything has already been connected through a series of wire harnesses. So for example, the external BEC, it's also running with the throttle lead. So here, channel 1 is my aileron, and it's already labeled as well. So aileron, channel 2 is my elevator, channel 3 is my throttle, Channel 4 is my rudder and steering system from the nose landing gear. And then channel 5, my main retracts and front retracts running through the sequencer that I just showed earlier. Channel 6, my flaps. Channel 7 and 8, my thrust vectoring. Another important thing that I don't want to leave out is that the ailerons and the elevators are hardwired together, so they're mixed intentionally through the Y system or the Y splits. So on one Y split, you'll have one going to the aileron and then another going to the elevator. So that would be, say for example, channel 1, and then channel 2, one Y split is going to one aileron and then the other one to the elevator. It's crisscross. I have the airplane turned over and ready for the power up procedure. This will use two 3 cells in series. So stock, it comes with the bullet connections, and to set this up, I will connect the negative lead from one battery and the positive from the other. I will also be shifting the batteries accordingly so that I can match the proper CG. So let's get this connected in series. All right, so two 3 cells will obviously make up a 6 cell battery here. Okay, so now we have 2 extra, or 2 last ones, 2 final leads, and then 2 coming from the ESC. We'll connect our positive together here. Perfect. And the last negative connection here. You'll notice a spark. That's perfectly normal. There's a pretty good amount of voltage running through the system. Okay, so I have it turned over, and just a quick response. That looks great. Very nice. Okay guys, so that pretty much wraps up the build review for the PAK FA T-50 here at Banana Hobby. As you can see, the build process wasn't too difficult. We got it here assembled in a few minutes. So the only certain points that you'll probably have the most complication with is installing the horizontal stabilizers, but everything else goes together smoothly. The wings are detachable through the wing locking mechanism, where you can either unscrew it or screw it back in place. If you have any other questions about this model, since it is an upcoming model, or any concerns about it, we do have a technical support text line where you can send in a text message. I'm actually answering questions that we get there throughout the day, and I would be more than glad to help. As always, thank you for watching.